Marcus Thompson pulled into his driveway after another long 12-hour shift at the children's hospital. His blue scrubs were wrinkled and he felt exhausted, but it was the good kind of tired that came from helping sick kids feel better. He loved his job as a pediatric nurse, even though it was emotionally draining some days. Seeing children fight serious illnesses reminded him how precious life was and how quickly things could change. The house next door had been empty for 2 months, and Marcus was curious about his new neighbors. He had seen the moving truck earlier that week, but had been working double shifts and missed meeting them. The house was a nice 2-story with a small front yard and looked perfect for a family. Marcus hoped whoever moved in would be friendly because he enjoyed having good neighbors. As Marcus got out of his car, he noticed a woman and a little girl carrying boxes from a van to the front porch. It was starting to rain and they looked like they were rushing to get everything inside before it got worse. The woman was wearing a business suit even though it was evening, and the little girl had blonde curls that bounced as she ran back and forth. With small boxes, Marcus grabbed his umbrella and walked over to introduce himself. He could see the woman tense up when she noticed him approaching, and her hand moved protectively to her daughter's shoulder. Marcus understood her caution, because many single mothers had to be careful about strangers. He kept his distance and spoke in a gentle voice so she would know he meant no harm. The woman introduced herself as Sarah and her daughter as Emma. Sarah had beautiful green eyes, but they looked tired and stressed. She was polite but clearly wanted to finish moving their things before the rain got heavier. Marcus offered to help carry some boxes, but Sarah quickly declined, saying they could manage on their own. He could tell she was not used to accepting help from people. Emma was more open than her mother and smiled when Marcus waved at her. She was carrying a stuffed elephant that was almost as big as she was, and when she tripped on the front steps, the toy fell into a mud puddle. Emma's face crumpled like she was about to cry, and Sarah looked frustrated that one more thing had gone wrong that day. Marcus picked up the stuffed elephant and brushed off the mud as best he could. He told Emma that elephants loved getting dirty, and that this one would be clean again after a good bath. Emma giggled and hugged the muddy toy close to her chest. Sarah looked surprised that a stranger would be so kind to her daughter, and Marcus saw her shoulders relax slightly. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself paying attention to his new neighbors without meaning to be nosy. Sarah left for work very early every morning, looking perfectly put together in expensive clothes and high heels. She drove a shiny black car that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. Emma went to the elementary school down the street, and Sarah picked her up every afternoon at exactly 3:15. Marcus worked different shifts at the hospital, so sometimes he was home during the day when most people were at work. He noticed that Sarah often came home during lunch looking stressed and talking loudly on her phone. She would pace back and forth in her driveway, gesturing with her hands like she was arguing with someone. Marcus could not hear the words, but her body language showed she was dealing with difficult situations. Emma played alone in their small backyard most evenings, while Sarah worked on her laptop at the kitchen table. Marcus could see them through the window, and it made him sad that the little girl did not have other children to play with. Sometimes Emma would look over at his house and wave, and Marcus would wave back from his kitchen window. Her smile always brightened his day after dealing with sick children at work. Marcus started leaving small gifts on their doorstep without telling them who they were from. He bought children's books at garage sales and left them by their front door with notes saying they were for Emma. He picked flowers from his garden and left small bouquets with notes welcoming them to the neighborhood. Sarah probably thought the gifts came from multiple neighbors, and Marcus was happy to let her believe that. One morning, Marcus was working in his front yard when Sarah's car would not start. She tried the engine several times, but it just made clicking noises and would not turn over. Emma was going to be late for school, and Sarah looked panicked as she called someone on her phone. Marcus could hear her voice getting higher and more stressed as she explained the situation. Marcus walked over and offered to drive Emma to school so she would not be late. Sarah hesitated for a long moment, and Marcus could see her weighing the risks of trusting a neighbor she barely knew with her most precious possession. Finally, she agreed, but only after getting Marcus's full name and phone number and making him promise to call her as soon as Emma was safely at school. Emma chattered happily in Marcus's car on the way to school, telling him about her favorite subjects and her teacher, Mrs. Johnson. She was a bright child with lots of personality, and Marcus found himself laughing at her funny observations about everything they passed on the drive. When they arrived at school, Emma hugged Marcus goodbye. like they were old friends, and skipped into the building with her backpack. Bouncing, Marcus called Sarah immediately to let her know Emma had arrived safely and was met by her teacher. Sarah's relief was obvious in her voice, and she thanked him multiple times for helping them out of a difficult situation. She offered to pay Marcus for the gas money, but he refused, saying neighbors should help each other when they can. That afternoon, Sarah knocked on Marcus's door with a plate of homemade cookies as a thank you gift. She seemed less guarded than usual, and they talked for a few minutes on his front porch. Sarah explained that she was still learning to trust people after some difficult experiences, but she appreciated his kindness to Emma. Marcus could see pain behind her smile and wondered what had made such a successful woman so careful about letting people get close. Sarah felt her phone buzzing against her ear as she paced around her office conference room. Her biggest client, Richardson Industries, was on the other end of the line, and the news was not good. After 2 years of working together, they were cutting their marketing budget by 70% and would no longer need Sarah's services. The contract was worth nearly $500,000 a year, and losing it would mean laying off employees and possibly closing her business. The client explained that their company was downsizing due to economic pressures, and they had to make difficult choices about which services to keep. Sarah tried to negotiate a smaller contract or different payment terms, but Richardson Industries had already made their decision. They would finish out the current month and then end their relationship with Mitchell Marketing Agency. After hanging up the phone, Sarah sat down hard in her leather chair and put her head in her hands. This was exactly the kind of disaster she had been afraid of since David left. All her hard work building the business could disappear in a matter of months if she could not find new clients quickly. She had employee salaries to pay, and office rent, and her own mortgage at home. The stress felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. Sarah looked at her watch and realized she had to leave soon to pick up Emma from school. She could not let her daughter see how worried she was about their future. Emma had already lived through enough uncertainty for one childhood, and Sarah was determined to protect her from adult problems. She fixed her makeup and practiced smiling in the bathroom mirror before leaving the office. On the drive to Emma's school, Sarah's mind raced with possible solutions. She could take out a business loan to cover expenses while looking for new clients, but that meant going into debt again. She could sell the house and move back to an apartment to reduce their monthly costs. Maybe she should have kept more money in savings instead of investing everything back into growing the business. Emma bounced into the car full of energy and stories about her day at school. She had made a new friend named Katie, and they were going to work on a science project together about butterflies. Emma asked if Katie could come over to play sometime, and Sarah's heart sank, knowing she might have to say no if money got too tight. Everything Emma wanted seemed to cost money that Sarah was not sure she would have. That evening, while Emma did her homework at the kitchen table, Sarah spread financial papers across her desk, trying to figure out how long they could survive without the Richardson contract. The numbers looked scary no matter how many times she added them up. She had maybe 3 months of expenses saved if she cut everything down to the bare minimum. Sarah heard Emma's stomach growling and realized she had forgotten about dinner again. She opened the refrigerator, but there was not much inside except some leftover pasta and a few vegetables that were starting to look wilted. Emma never complained about eating the same simple meals over and over, but Sarah felt guilty that she could not provide better for her daughter. While heating up the leftover pasta, Sarah noticed Marcus working in his garden next door. He always seemed so calm and peaceful even after his long shifts at the hospital. Sarah wondered what it would be like to have a job that helped people, instead of constantly worrying about money and contracts and keeping a business running. Marcus looked up and waved when he saw her at the kitchen window, and Sarah found herself waving back. Emma asked if they could invite Marcus over for dinner since he was always so nice to them. Sarah explained that they barely knew him, and it would be inappropriate to invite a neighbor for dinner. Emma argued that Marcus had helped them when their car broke down, and he always smiled and waved at her when she played outside. Sarah could see that her daughter was lonely and wanted more people in their small family, but trusting strangers still felt dangerous. After putting Emma to bed, Sarah sat on her back porch with a glass of wine, trying to think clearly about her options. The night air was cool, and she could hear Marcus moving around in his kitchen next door. She wondered if he had family nearby or if he was as alone as she felt most of the time. Being a single parent meant making every decision by herself and never having anyone to talk through problems with. Sarah's phone rang, and she saw it was her business partner Janet calling from home. Janet had heard about the Richardson contract and wanted to discuss their next steps. They talked for over an hour about which employees they might have to let go and how to approach potential new clients. Janet suggested they both take pay cuts to avoid laying off their team, but Sarah was not sure she could afford any less income with Emma to support. The conversation with Janet made Sarah feel slightly better because at least she was not facing this crisis completely alone. They agreed to meet early the next morning to review their client list and start making calls to drum up new business. Sarah knew it would take months to replace the income from Richardson Industries, but she had to try everything possible before giving up. As Sarah got ready for bed, she checked on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully, with her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. Emma trusted that her mother would take care of everything and had no idea how close they might be to losing their home again. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead and promised silently that she would find a way to keep their life stable no matter what it took. The next morning, Sarah woke up before her alarm feeling exhausted but determined to fight for her business and her family's future. Sarah felt her phone buzzing against her ear as she paced around her office conference room. Her biggest client, Richardson Industries, was on the other end of the line, and the news was not good. After 2 years of working together, they were cutting their marketing budget by 70% and would no longer need Sarah's services. The contract was worth nearly $500,000. A year and losing it would mean laying off employees and possibly closing her business. The client explained that their company was downsizing due to economic pressures and they had to make difficult choices about which services to keep. Sarah tried to negotiate a smaller contract or different payment terms, but Richardson Industries had already made their decision. They would finish out the current month and then end their relationship with Mitchell Marketing Agency. After hanging up the phone, Sarah sat down hard in her leather chair and put her head in her hands. This was exactly the kind of disaster she had been afraid of since David left. All her hard work building the business could disappear in a matter of months if she could not find new clients quickly. She had employee salaries to pay and office rent and her own mortgage at home. The stress felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. Sarah looked at her watch and realized she had to leave soon to pick up Emma from school. She could not let her daughter see how worried she was about their future. Emma had already lived through enough uncertainty for one childhood, and Sarah was determined to protect her from adult problems. She fixed her makeup and practiced smiling in the bathroom mirror before leaving the office. On the drive to Emma's school, Sarah's mind raced with possible solutions. She could take out a business loan to cover expenses while looking for new clients, but that meant going into debt again. She could sell the house and move back to an apartment to reduce their monthly costs. Maybe she should have kept more money in savings instead of investing everything back into growing the business. Emma bounced into the car full of energy and stories about her day at school. She had made a new friend named Katie, and they were going to work on a science project together about butterflies. Emma asked if Katie could come over to play sometime, and Sarah's heart sank, knowing she might have to say no if money got too tight. Everything Emma wanted seemed to cost money that Sarah was not sure she would have. That evening, while Emma did her homework at the kitchen table, Sarah spread financial papers across her desk, trying to figure out how long they could survive without the Richardson contract. The numbers looked scary no matter how many times she added them up. She had maybe 3 months of expenses saved if she cut everything down to the bare minimum. Sarah heard Emma's stomach growling and realized she had forgotten about dinner again. She opened the refrigerator, but there was not much inside except some leftover pasta and a few vegetables that were starting to look wilted. Emma never complained about eating the same simple meals over and over, but Sarah felt guilty that she could not provide better for her daughter. While heating up the leftover pasta, Sarah noticed Marcus working in his garden next door. He always seemed so calm and peaceful even after his long shifts at the hospital. Sarah wondered what it would be like to have a job that helped people, instead of constantly worrying about money and contracts and keeping a business running. Marcus looked up and waved when he saw her at the kitchen window, and Sarah found herself waving back. Emma asked if they could invite Marcus over for dinner since he was always so nice to them. Sarah explained that they barely knew him, and it would be inappropriate to invite a neighbor for dinner. Emma argued that Marcus had helped them when their car broke down and he always smiled and waved at her when she played outside. Sarah could see that her daughter was lonely and wanted more people in their small family, but trusting strangers still felt dangerous. Marcus finished his morning coffee and looked out his kitchen window toward Sarah's house. Her car was still in the driveway, which was unusual because she normally left for work before 7 in the morning. He could see her sitting behind the steering wheel, but she was not moving or starting the engine. Something about her posture made Marcus concerned that she might be upset or having car trouble again. For the past few weeks, Marcus had noticed that Sarah seemed more stressed than usual. She was on her phone constantly, and he had heard her raising her voice during calls that seemed to be about work problems. Emma had mentioned that her mom was working late every night and sometimes forgot to eat dinner until Emma reminded her. Marcus worried that Sarah was pushing herself too hard, trying to handle everything alone. Marcus put on his jacket and walked across the yard to check on Sarah. As he got closer to her car, he could see that she was crying. Her shoulders were shaking and she had her face buried in her hands. Marcus tapped gently on the passenger side window, and Sarah looked up with red eyes and tear-stained cheeks. She seemed embarrassed that someone had caught her falling apart. Sarah rolled down the window and tried to wipe away her tears quickly, while apologizing for being emotional. Marcus asked if he could sit with her for a minute, and Sarah unlocked the passenger door without saying anything. They sat in silence for a few moments while Sarah gathered her composure, and Marcus waited patiently for her to speak when she was ready. Finally, Sarah began talking about losing her biggest client and how scared she was about the future. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam as she explained about David's betrayal and having to rebuild her life from nothing. She talked about the pressure of being Emma's only parent and provider, and how tired she was of pretending to have everything under control when inside she felt like she was drowning. Marcus listened without interrupting or offering solutions that Sarah had probably already thought of herself. He understood the weight of responsibility because his own mother had raised 3 children alone after his father died in a car accident. He remembered the nights when his mother thought the children were asleep, but she was crying over bills she could not pay and groceries she could not afford. When Sarah finished talking, she apologized again for dumping her problems on someone she barely knew. Marcus told her that sometimes talking to a stranger was easier than talking to friends or family who might judge or offer unwanted advice. He shared a little about his own childhood and how his mother had struggled as a single parent, but eventually built a good life for her children through determination and hard work. Sarah seemed surprised that Marcus understood her situation so well and was not treating her like she was weak for having moments of doubt. Most people saw her as a successful businesswoman who had everything figured out and expected her to always be strong and confident. It felt good to be honest with someone about how hard her life really was behind the polished exterior she showed the world. Marcus suggested that Sarah take the day off from work and spend time with Emma instead of trying to solve everything immediately. Sometimes the best ideas came when people stopped pushing so hard and gave their minds a chance to rest. Sarah protested that she could not afford to waste time when her business was in crisis, but Marcus pointed out that working while exhausted and emotional rarely led to good decisions. After Marcus went back to his house, Sarah sat in her car for another 10 minutes thinking about their conversation. She realized that she had not talked honestly about her fears with anyone since David left. Her employees looked to her for leadership and confidence, and her parents would only worry if they knew how bad things had gotten. Having Marcus listen without judgment felt like a gift she had not expected. Sarah called her office and told her assistant that she would be working from home that day. She picked up Emma early from school, and they spent the afternoon baking cookies and playing board games instead of Sarah sitting at her computer sending desperate emails to potential clients. Emma was delighted to have her mother's full attention for once, and they laughed together in a way they had not done in weeks. That evening, while Emma was taking a bath, Sarah knocked on Marcus's door with a plate of the cookies they had made. She wanted to thank him for listening and for reminding her that taking care of herself was important too. Marcus invited her to sit on his front porch, and they talked about easier topics like their favorite books and places they had traveled. Marcus told Sarah about his work at the children's hospital and why he had chosen pediatric nursing as his career. He loved helping kids feel better when they were sick and scared, and he was good at explaining medical procedures in ways that children could understand. Sarah could see the compassion in his eyes when he talked about his young patients, and she found herself trusting him more than she had trusted anyone in years. Sarah shared some happier stories about building her marketing business and the satisfaction she felt when she helped small companies grow and succeed. She had always been creative and good with people, and marketing felt like the perfect combination of both skills. Before David's betrayal, she had dreams of expanding nationally and maybe even internationally someday. As they talked, Sarah realized that she felt more relaxed than she had in months. Marcus had a calming presence that made her forget about her problems for a while and just enjoy having an adult conversation with someone who seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. When Emma called from upstairs that she was ready for her bedtime story, Sarah felt disappointed that their talk had to end. Marcus walked Sarah to her door and told her that he was available anytime she needed someone to listen. He did not offer to solve her business problems or give her money, but his friendship felt more valuable than either of those things. Sarah went to bed that night feeling less alone than she had in a very long time. Emma was playing hopscotch in the driveway when she noticed Marcus coming home from his grocery shopping trip. She waved excitedly and ran over to see what he had bought because Marcus always seemed to have interesting things in his shopping bags. Today he had fresh strawberries, and Emma's eyes lit up because they were her favorite fruit, but her mom said they were too expensive to buy very often. Marcus smiled at Emma's enthusiasm and asked if she would like to help him make strawberry pancakes for breakfast the next morning. Emma jumped up and down with excitement, but then her face fell as she remembered that her mother probably would not let her go to a neighbor's house without supervision. Emma explained that her mom was very careful about safety and did not like Emma going places without her understanding. Emma's disappointment, Marcus suggested that maybe Sarah and Emma could both come over for breakfast, if Sarah was comfortable with the idea. Emma thought this was a wonderful plan and ran inside to ask her mother before Marcus could even make it to his front door. Through the window, Marcus could hear Emma's excited voice, explaining about the strawberry pancakes and begging her mom to say yes. Appeared at her front door looking tired but trying to smile at her daughter's excitement. Emma was bouncing from foot to foot waiting for an answer, and Marcus could see Sarah weighing the invitation carefully. He assured Sarah that the offer was completely casual and she should not feel any pressure to accept if she preferred to keep their relationship as distant neighbors. After a moment, Sarah surprised herself by accepting the invitation for breakfast. Emma cheered and hugged her mother's legs while Sarah wondered what had made her agree to something she normally would have politely declined. Maybe it was the genuine kindness she saw in Marcus's face, or maybe she was just tired of always saying no to things that might make Emma happy. The next morning, Emma was up early and dressed in her favorite sundress before Sarah had even finished her first cup of coffee. Emma had been talking about the strawberry pancakes since she woke up, and Sarah realized how rarely her daughter got excited about simple pleasures like breakfast with a friend. Sarah felt a pang of guilt that she had been so focused on work and money problems that she had forgotten to notice what Emma needed emotionally. Marcus's house smelled amazing when Sarah and Emma knocked on the door. He had already started mixing the pancake batter and had fresh coffee brewing for Sarah. Emma immediately ran to the kitchen to see how she could help, and Marcus patiently showed her how to measure flour and crack eggs. Sarah watched from the doorway, amazed at how naturally Marcus interacted with her daughter. While the pancakes cooked, Emma chattered non-stop about school and her friends and her plans for summer vacation. Marcus listened to every word and asked thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely interested in what Emma had to say. Sarah could not remember the last time an adult had given Emma such focused attention, and she felt her heart warm watching her daughter bloom under Marcus's kind attention. The strawberry pancakes were delicious, and Emma declared them the best breakfast she had ever eaten. Marcus had also made fresh orange juice, and Sarah found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did anymore. The kitchen felt cozy and welcoming, and for a few moments Sarah could pretend they were a normal family having a normal Saturday morning breakfast together. After they finished eating, Emma asked if she could see Marcus's backyard because she had noticed he had a vegetable garden. Marcus was proud of his tomatoes and peppers, and he showed Emma how to tell which vegetables were ready to be picked. Emma was fascinated by the idea of growing your own food and asked Marcus dozens of questions about planting and watering and caring for plants. Sarah watched from the porch as Marcus patiently answered all of Emma's questions and let her help harvest some tomatoes for them to take home. She could see how much Emma was enjoying having a male figure pay attention to her, and Sarah felt a mix of happiness and sadness. Emma deserved to have positive men in her life, but Sarah was still afraid of letting anyone get too close to her daughter. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged Marcus goodbye and asked when they could come back for breakfast again. Sarah felt embarrassed by her daughter's boldness, but Marcus just laughed and said anytime they wanted strawberry pancakes they should let him know. He sent them home with a bag of fresh vegetables from his garden, and Emma skipped all the way across the yard carrying her treasures. That afternoon, while Emma was taking a nap, Sarah found herself thinking about their morning at Marcus's house. She had not realized how much she missed having adult conversation that was not about work or money or the endless details of single parenting. Marcus was easy to talk to, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know both her and Emma as people rather than just neighbors. Sarah also noticed that Emma had been happier and more talkative than she had been in weeks. Her daughter was naturally social and outgoing, but Sarah had been so protective and careful about who they spent time with that Emma rarely got to interact with new people. Maybe Sarah's fears were keeping Emma from having the kind of childhood she deserved. Later that evening, Sarah was working on her laptop when she heard Marcus's car pull into his driveway. She looked out the window and saw him carrying what looked like medical textbooks and continuing education materials. Sarah realized that despite his easygoing personality, Marcus was probably very intelligent and dedicated to his career, just like she was dedicated to hers. The thought made Sarah curious about Marcus in a way she had not been curious about a man since David left. She wondered about his background and his family, and why such a kind and attractive man was living alone. Sarah quickly pushed those thoughts away because she had no business thinking about Marcus as anything other than a helpful neighbor. Her life was complicated enough without adding romance to the mix, but as Sarah got ready for bed that night, she found herself smiling as she remembered Emma's laughter during breakfast and the way Marcus had made them both feel welcome in his home. For the first time in 3 years, Sarah allowed herself to wonder what it might be like to have someone to share the good moments with, instead of always experiencing them alone. Sarah's hands were shaking as she hung up the phone after what might have been the most important call of her professional life. Thompson Manufacturing had just agreed to sign a contract with Mitchell Marketing Agency that would replace most of the income she had lost when Richardson Industries canceled their deal. The company needed a complete rebrand and marketing campaign for their new product line, and they wanted Sarah's team to handle everything. The contract was worth $600,000 over 18 months and would require Sarah to hire additional employees to handle the workload. After weeks of sleepless nights worrying about layoffs and possibly losing her business, Sarah finally had good news to share with her team. She called her assistant and asked her to schedule an all-hands meeting for that afternoon so she could announce the new contract. Sarah felt like she could breathe freely for the first time in months, but she also felt exhausted from the stress of nearly losing everything she had worked to build. The constant worry about money and the future had taken a toll on her health and her relationship with Emma. Sarah realized that she had been short-tempered and distracted for weeks while dealing with the business crisis. That evening, Sarah decided to cook a special dinner to celebrate the good news and to make up for all the simple meals and late dinners Emma had endured recently. She stopped at the grocery store and bought Emma's favorite foods, including the expensive strawberries that had become a rare treat in their household. Sarah wanted this meal to feel like a celebration of their family, surviving another difficult period. While Sarah was cooking, Emma asked why she seemed so happy and relaxed compared to how worried she had been lately. Sarah explained in simple terms that her work had been having problems, but now things were better and they did not have to worry about money for a while. Emma hugged her mother tightly and said she was glad, because she did not like seeing her mom sad and stressed all the time. During dinner, Emma mentioned that Marcus had asked about Sarah earlier when he saw Emma playing outside after school. Emma said Marcus seemed concerned because he had noticed that Sarah's car had not been in the driveway as much, and he wondered if everything was okay with their family. Sarah felt touched that Marcus had been paying attention and cared enough to check on them through Emma. After putting Emma to bed, Sarah found herself standing at her kitchen window looking toward Marcus's house. His lights were on, and she could see him moving around in his kitchen, probably making dinner after his long shift at the hospital. Sarah realized that she wanted to share her good news with someone who would understand how scared she had been about losing her. business, and how relieved she felt now. Before she could change her mind, Sarah walked across the yard and knocked on Marcus's front door. When he answered, she could see the surprise and concern in his eyes because she had never come to his house alone in the evening before. Sarah quickly explained that everything was fine and she just wanted to thank him for his kindness during her difficult few weeks. Marcus invited Sarah to sit on his front porch and she told him about the new contract and how it would save her business. Marcus listened with genuine interest and congratulated her on fighting through such a challenging situation. He said he had been worried about her and Emma because he could see how much stress Sarah was under, even though she tried to hide it from everyone. Sarah found herself opening up to Marcus about how scared she had been of failing and having to uproot Emma's life again. She admitted that the fear of not being able to provide for her daughter kept her awake at night and made her feel like she was not good enough as a single parent. Marcus listened without judgment and shared that his own mother had struggled with similar fears when she was raising her children alone. As they talked, Sarah realized that Marcus understood the weight of responsibility she carried in a way that most people could not. He had grown up watching his mother work multiple jobs and sacrifice her own needs to take care of her family. Marcus said his mother had taught him that strength was not about never being afraid, but about keeping going even when you were terrified. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as Sarah began to relax and enjoy Marcus's company. They talked about books they had read and movies they wanted to see, and places they hoped to travel someday. Sarah could not remember the last time she had talked to someone about her dreams and interests, rather than just work and Emma's needs. Marcus mentioned that he was planning to plant a bigger vegetable garden next spring and asked if Emma might like to help him design it. He thought she would enjoy learning about different types of plants and watching them grow from seeds. Sarah loved the idea because Emma had been fascinated by Marcus's current garden and was always asking questions about how plants grew. When Sarah finally looked at her watch, she was shocked to realize they had been talking for over 2 hours. The time had passed so quickly and she felt more relaxed than she had in months. Marcus walked her to her door and Sarah thanked him again for being such a good listener and friend during her difficult time. That night, as Sarah got ready for bed, she thought about how natural it had felt to share her fears and celebrations with Marcus. She had not trusted anyone with her deepest worries since David left, but something about Marcus made her feel safe enough to be honest about her struggles. Sarah wondered if this was what friendship was supposed to feel like between adults. Sarah also found herself thinking about Marcus in ways that had nothing to do with friendship. She noticed how his eyes crinkled when he smiled and how his voice became gentle when he talked about Emma. She remembered the warmth of his hand when he had briefly touched her shoulder to comfort her and the way her heart had skipped a beat at the simple contact. These thoughts scared Sarah because she had promised herself never to risk her heart again after David's betrayal. But Marcus seemed different from David in every way that mattered. He was steady and kind and genuinely interested in other people's well-being. Sarah fell asleep wondering if it was possible that she was starting to have feelings for her neighbor that went beyond gratitude and friendship. Marcus woke up thinking about Sarah just like he had every morning for the past few weeks. Last night, when she had come to his door to share her good news about the new contract, he had seen a different side of her. Instead of the stressed businesswoman who was always rushing somewhere, Sarah had seemed relaxed and genuinely happy. The smile on her face when she talked about saving her business had made Marcus's heart race in a way he had not experienced in years. As Marcus got ready for work, he admitted to himself that his feelings for Sarah had grown far beyond neighborly concern. He was falling in love with this strong, brave woman who was raising an amazing daughter while building a successful business. But Marcus also knew that Sarah had been deeply hurt by her ex-husband and was not looking for romance or complications in her carefully controlled life. At the hospital, Marcus found it hard to concentrate on his work because his thoughts kept drifting to Sarah and Emma. His coworkers noticed that he seemed distracted, and one of the other nurses asked if everything was okay at home. Marcus realized he had been talking about his neighbors more than usual lately, and his friends were starting to tease him about his obvious interest in the single mom next door. During his lunch break, Marcus called his older sister Teresa, who had always been his best friend and advisor. He told her about Sarah and Emma, and admitted that he was developing serious feelings for a woman who had made it clear she was not interested in dating anyone. Teresa listened patiently and then asked Marcus what his gut instincts told him about Sarah's feelings toward him. Marcus had to admit that sometimes he caught Sarah looking at him in a way that seemed like more than friendship. When they talked on his porch the other night, he had felt a connection between them that went beyond their conversations. But Sarah was also very guarded and careful about protecting herself and Emma from getting hurt again. Marcus did not want to risk their friendship by making Sarah uncomfortable with unwanted romantic advances. Teresa reminded Marcus that their mother had been a single parent who was afraid to trust men after their father died. She said it had taken years for their mother to believe that their stepfather genuinely cared about her and her children. Teresa advised Marcus to be patient and let Sarah set the pace for any relationship development, while continuing to show through his actions that he was trustworthy and reliable. That evening, Marcus was working in his garden when he heard Emma calling his name from her backyard. She had discovered a baby bird that had fallen from its nest and was crying because she thought it was hurt. Marcus carefully examined the tiny bird and determined that it was unharmed, but too young to fly back to safety. He showed Emma how to make a soft nest in a small box and explained that they would need to keep the baby bird warm and safe until it was old enough to survive on its own. Sarah came outside to see what the excitement was about and found Marcus patiently explaining bird biology to Emma while they prepared a temporary home for their unexpected visitor. Sarah was touched by Marcus's gentleness with both the injured animal and her curious daughter. She offered to let them keep the bird inside their house where it would be safer from neighborhood cats. For the next few days, Marcus stopped by every morning before work to check on the baby bird and help Emma feed it with a tiny dropper. Emma was fascinated by the responsibility of caring for another living creature and asked Marcus dozens of questions about how animals grew and survived in the wild. Sarah watched these interactions with growing appreciation for Marcus's patience and natural teaching abilities. Emma began asking Sarah when Marcus would come to visit each day and would run to the window to watch for his car in the driveway. Sarah realized that her daughter was becoming very attached to Marcus, and she felt worried about what would happen if he ever decided to move away or lost interest in spending time with them. Emma had already been abandoned by one important man in her life, and Sarah could not bear the thought of her daughter being hurt again. One evening, while they were all watching the baby bird take its first successful flight around Sarah's living room, Emma asked if Marcus could stay for dinner. Sarah hesitated because sharing meals felt like something families did together, and she did not want Emma to get confused about Marcus's role in their lives. But Emma looked so hopeful, and Marcus seemed genuinely pleased by the invitation that Sarah found herself agreeing. During dinner, Emma chattered happily about her day at school and asked Marcus about his work at the hospital. She wanted to know if he had helped any children feel better, and if he had seen any interesting medical cases. Marcus answered all her questions with enthusiasm and shared funny stories about some of his young patients that made Emma giggle with delight. Sarah found herself studying Marcus as he interacted with Emma and wondering what kind of father he would be to his own children someday. He was naturally nurturing and patient and seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with kids. Sarah caught herself imagining what it would be like if Marcus was Emma's stepfather, and then immediately pushed those dangerous thoughts out of her mind. After Marcus left that night, Emma asked Sarah if she thought Marcus would ever get married and have children of his own. Sarah explained that she did not know Marcus well enough to know his plans for the future, but that he would probably make a wonderful father someday. Emma said she hoped Marcus would marry someone who already had a daughter, because she thought he would be the best dad ever. Sarah tucked Emma into bed with a heavy heart because she could see how much her daughter craved having a father figure in her life. David's abandonment had left a hole in Emma's world that Sarah could not fill no matter how hard she tried. But letting Marcus get too close felt dangerous because Sarah was not sure she could handle another betrayal, and she knew Emma's heart would be completely broken if Marcus ever left them. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about the impossible situation she found herself in. She was falling in love with a man who seemed perfect for both her and Emma, but she was too afraid of being hurt again to take the risk of opening her heart. Sarah wondered if her fear of another betrayal was going to keep her from the happiness that seemed to be right next door, waiting for her to be brave enough to reach for it.